Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out to hear a little bit about how to protect your family and different options that can help you do that. Is it not turning? Okay, it just turned. So I just want to give a little bit about myself and my background. My name's Lucinda Jones. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I went to WKU, so I got my bachelor's here, but I got my master's at Northern Kentucky University. Um, I then started to see patients for a little while and started to see how policy and the law intersects with access to healthcare. So I went back to school to get another master's degree from the University of Washington. So I spent 12 plus years in the ICU and outpatient care, and I work more so now in a policy role. And then I just started a company called Landmark Care Navigation, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on in the presentation. So I serve the DMV area in person, and then I support other people virtually nationwide. Okay. So a few things that we'll be covering today. So we will be going over advanced care planning and healthcare directives. We'll be going over Medicare, Medicaid, what that covers, what's a health savings account, and then also landmark care navigation and what does professional help look like, as well as your questions afterwards. So I first want to ask a question to the audience of how who has had to make a decision for someone when they were in a medical crisis? By a raise of hand. All right. And does anybody want to share what it felt like to make that decision for someone? I'll bring the no, you don't.
I had to make all the medical decisions for my mom. Um, she had got really sick. She was on dialysis. She had cancer. She had no living will, no advance directive. So that left me having to make the decisions if she was going to continue with dialysis, if she was going to have treatment for cancer, what did she want to do? And it was not a good feeling to have to make that determination.
And this is the exact reason why I named the presentation Protecting Your People, because there's so many people that have the same. I'm going to stay down here. Is that okay? Because I can't see from there. There's so many people that have the same experience. Someone gets sick all of a sudden, they have to make medical decisions for someone, and they don't know what that person would actually want. And in the middle of a crisis, when your family member's sick, not knowing what they want adds extra stress to you as a person. So I'll go a little bit over what advanced care planning is. Advanced care planning is really writing down what matters to you most should you have to have someone make decisions for you. So that includes that, for example, would you want to be on dialysis? Would you want artificial nutrition, which would be in an emergent situation, it would be, they call it an NG tube, which is a tube that goes down your nose, but a long-term feeding, artificial feeding tube is put in through your stomach, which is called a PEG tube usually. Um, Also, would you want to be on a breathing machine? There's so many decisions that have to be made, and advanced care planning just is that. It's writing out what you would actually want should some emergency happen. It gives your family guidance of what you would want if you were seriously ill. So the living will, I kind of went into it a little bit. So the living will part is really the detailed part of the advance directive. It goes over, I talked about ventilators, feeding tubes, CPR. I didn't talk about that. CPR is basically, most people are probably familiar with it, that if your heart were to stop, would you want to be resuscitated? Now, that's something to think about specifically based on your current health status. Some people that have more chronic conditions may not recover as much from CPR. People that are younger and are healthier, they have a better chance of getting back to a regular life if they were to have CPR. So I encourage people, when you're thinking about these decisions, having a conversation with your healthcare provider, and they can say, based on my current health condition, would it be beneficial for me to get CPR? And they can tell you what someone of your current health condition, how would you recover if you had CPR? Or comfort focused care, usually people that have a serious illness that are on palliative care or hospice care. The goal is to keep them comfortable. It doesn't mean that they're not going to treat you if you have, an infection that could make you comfortable, but it's more so focused on keeping the person comfort. And in different states, they have different names of the advanced directives. So some call them advanced directives, some call them physician directives, and it really varies by state. It could be drafted by an attorney. You could go to your state website. They have the forms. Usually you can fill them out by yourself. This also varies by state. You just have to download the form and follow the instructions on how to get that completed. And then a healthcare power of attorney is really the person that you name to speak for you. And that person really you need to trust them, and they also need to be good when there's a crisis, because when medical decisions happen and you have to make decisions about someone's health care, you have to be able to perform during crisis. That's all I can say. And different states call them different things. So some of the states call them a healthcare proxy, a medical power of attorney, or a healthcare agent. It varies by state. But basically, that's the person who you plan to choose should you have to have someone make medical decisions for you. So a post or most, some states call them most, those are physician orders, and you have to go to your physician, your treating physician, to get those. Those are usually for people that have serious illness, and you wouldn't be surprised if they were to have a medical event that would require someone to make decisions for them. So advanced care planning and advanced directives are for people of any age. The post and most are more so for people that may have some chronic condition that you wouldn't be surprised if they needed someone to make decisions for them. And then we talked about we talked about CPR. So another type of order that a physician can sign is a DNR, which is do not resuscitate. Your heart stops, you decide that you don't want to be resuscitated. What I don't have up here is a DNI, and that's do not intubate. So that means that you wouldn't want a breathing machine should you need to have a breathing machine. And those are orders that have to be signed by a physician. So let me go back to the advanced directive. So say that you put on your advanced directive that you don't want to be on a breathing machine. Those are not physician orders. Those are just written down wishes, and the power of attorney should follow those wishes, but that's not something that the emergency medical, like if they had to come to your house, the EMR could actively act upon. It would have to be only the post, most, and a DNR signed by a physician is something that EMS can act upon without having to confirm with someone. When you have an advanced directive, then they have to talk to your healthcare agent, and your healthcare agent ultimately makes the final decision on what happens with your healthcare. And hopefully they follow your guidelines. That's why it's important to pick someone that you trust to make decisions for you, that they're going to act in your best interest. So I'm going to go into the story, but I want to say something first because I'm not sure if I cover it later. So that the reason why it's so important to have an advance directive is that if you don't have one, a lot of people find this out very late, then it goes by whatever your state law is. So if your state law says that, say you only have a brother left, and your state law says that next of kin, so if you're estranged from that brother, then your brother is the person making medical decisions for you. So even more so if you have an estrangement with any family members, is it more important to fill out an advance directive, because I've seen many people come into the hospital and maybe it's their significant other and they're like, they don't talk to that family member. It really doesn't matter. The healthcare team has to go by what the law says. So I thought I would want to make that important point of even more so why, if you have any strained relationships, it's really important to get an advance directive. So this is a story. I like to use stories to kind of illustrate what happens when you don't have an advance directive, and this is a personal story. So just to give you context, my grandmother was in hospice, and we found, and the person who my grandma really talked to every day was my Aunt Shirley. And then all of a sudden, the contact kind of dropped off, and then when she was really sick, we couldn't get a hold of her. So my uncle had to drive, which was Illinois, about 5 hours to go and get her. So one of the things that we discovered when she came is that she couldn't recall anyone's name, which was very off because she knew us. She couldn't recall her name, and she couldn't really even recall, couldn't recall my grandmother's name either, which immediately was a red flag for me. Me and my uncle then took her to the hospital, and the hospital, it was actually at nighttime when we found out. We took her to the hospital, took her to the emergency room. They originally said, she may have a UTI, which I know from working in the hospital, that patients that have a UTI can come very confused. So, we were hoping that it was a UTI. Well, the nocturnist said, we'll admit her to the hospital, we'll give her antibiotics. If she becomes coherent after that, then we'll discharge her. If not, we'll give her, we'll consult neurology to assess her cognitive impairment. So we left her overnight because this was during COVID, and when I called the hospital the next day, they were like, we're going to discharge your aunt, and she's doing well. I was like, oh, really? That wasn't the plan that the nocturnist gave us last night. So I went to the hospital, and the physician was kind of going back and forth with me. I was like, well, the nocturnist said that, they were going to try IV antibiotics. I was like, before she leaves, they need to consult neurology. And he was like, well, he went back and forth with me, but I understand well how the hospital system works. So I pushed back on it. They got a CT scan. The CT scan came back okay. So then I consulted with my friend who's a neurologist, and she was like, if the CT scan came back clear and she's still confused, then you may want to get an MRI. Well, the physician didn't want to order an MRI. So we finally went back and forth, and he agreed to order the MRI. But ultimately, what they didn't want to happen was, it was a weekend. They didn't want to call somebody in, and I knew that because I've worked in the hospital for years, and it didn't really matter to me at that point. It's like, the person's on call, they need to come in. This could be something serious. So the physician finally agreed to do the MRI, but as I left the hospital to go get something to eat, the hospital, the pharmacy called and was like, Shirley's medication is ready. So I immediately went back up to the hospital and, advocated to speak to the patient advocate. And I was like, she needs to get an MRI. So they eventually done the MRI. And what the MRI showed was that she had a stroke. So the stroke wasn't the cause of her cognitive impairment, but it's still like, people don't have people advocating for them through the healthcare system. And should her family members not be there, she wouldn't have gotten the care that she actually received. So she didn't have an advance directive. She was cognitively impaired right now. She couldn't take care of her financial affairs. So we had to figure out how do we get guardianship, and I had to help kind of facilitate what paperwork do we need. So at the hospital, I was like, the physician needs to write a letter that she doesn't have decision making capacity and needs to recommend guardianship until she is able to remember family members can make decisions for herself and assess that her follow-up outpatient visits. So because we live in a small community and know the people there, we were able to navigate the system a lot easier than what I've seen in the hospitals that I've worked in, because I've worked in larger cities. Hospitals are focused on discharge and how can we get people through the hospital, and a lot of people don't have people there to advocate for them. So it's really clear to explicitly write these decisions down, and also get a professional help involved when there's issues that you don't know how to navigate yourself. And so if she would have had it, I won't read these verbatim, but why advanced care planning and what it would have changed everything. Bottom line, if she would have had an advance directive, we would have been easier to navigate through the system. It would have gave us more authority at that point. We probably still would have had to go back and forth through the system, but it would have made things a lot easier. It would have helped us as a family also understand what she specifically would have wanted if this would have happened. But we don't know her wishes because her wishes are not written down, so they're unknown. And that is why having an advance directive is so important. And so I'll talk a little bit about social workers and social workers in the hospital. Social workers are in inpatient hospital settings, or as the RN case manager, but social workers are not broadly out in the community because of the billing pathway, how we're defined in the Social Security Act. There's no reimbursement mechanism unless you're doing psychotherapy. So this care coordination, care management is not an option out in the community. And so if she would have had a social worker in the outpatient setting, they would have caught her cognitive impairment early. And what we found out later is that Adult Protective Services was called in Illinois, but when you're talking to her, she sounds fine. It's just when you start asking questions that are deeper, you know that something's not right. So, people not being, specifically trained to assess is someone cognitively impaired, which, the system failed her kind of all the way around. So this experience is not unique. It's symbolic of a systemic issue. The no billing pathway for outpatient. How do you catch patients on the outpatient side of things before it escalates, before the stakes are high? And so I kind of asked some of these questions earlier, but I wanted to kind of have a discussion. Who in the room already has completed an advance directive or a healthcare power of attorney? Okay. And for those who haven't, what has gotten in the way? Does anybody want to share? Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, spreading awareness, and I'll say this too, is there's a paper. So I'm a health and aging policy fellow too, and I spent a year on Capitol Hill learning about the legislative process. And during that process, I wrote a paper on advanced care planning and access to advanced care planning, and more specifically, Black people don't have as much access to advanced care planning, and when they do, they have a cost sharing associated with it. And that is likely attributed to when advanced care planning is offered, usually the person's already seriously ill at that point. It's not at the point of primary prevention, so it goes back to access up to health care. and which is probably not a definitive reason, but there's probably multiple reasons. But so that's something to think about too, is like making sure that other people in your life know about why it's important to have an advance directive. Yes. So that's a legal question. But what I will say from my experience is that if your paper is notarized and it has the like right things on it, usually hospitals are, trying to just find somebody to contact, especially if there's an emergent situation and someone needs to make decisions. It's state by state, so I don't want to say definitively yes that will work. More times than not, yes, it will. But there is a chance that a state could say this is not valid in our state. But I mean, if you're from Kentucky and you have a Kentucky Advance Directive, that makes sense that you have a Kentucky Advance Directive. Um, Health systems are not necessarily combing through things and saying that this is not from the state of Ohio. They're more so saying this was notarized, this has two signatures like it's supposed to have. They're going to more than likely 99% use the advance directive because it's an emergent situation and this tri-state area, right? Like you could be in or Missouri and you cross lines, they're more than likely going to accept the advance directive. I don't foresee a healthcare team saying, oh, this says Kentucky. What we look for is, oh, does this look legit? It's the biggest question that usually happens in the room. Any other questions? Okay. So I'll move forward to Medicare. I wanted to talk about the three different healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, and then health savings account. Just because sometimes people are confused about what each one does and get pleasantly surprised when they need long-term care and they think Medicare is going to pay for it. So Medicare is a federal health insurance program. It is for adults age 65 and older, and for people with certain disabilities are eligible. It's not income-based. It's based on your work history. I will say that traditional Medicare is always the way to go, just from my experience in the hospital. So I'll talk about what traditional Medicare means. So Medicare has Medicare Part A, which pays for the hospitalization stay. Skilled nursing facilities, should you have, break a hip and you need to go to subacute rehab at a nursing home to get back to walking well, then it pays for that, but after a qualifying hospital stay. And then most people don't have a premium for Medicare Part A. Medicare Part B is optional. If you enroll late, you'll get a penalty for enrolling late. It's your outpatient and preventative care, and also access to specialty care. So monthly premiums apply for Medicare B. And then Medicare C is Medicare Advantage. So this is everything within Medicare, and it's bundled with A and B. So you have access to outpatient and inpatient care. And there's a lot of advertising around this particular plan because they're ran through managed care companies. So traditional Medicare and Medicare Part C, which is Medicare Advantage, all of enrollees that are in Medicare Part C should have access to all services in traditional Medicare. You may have to advocate for yourself to do that, and there are some studies that show that when people get sicker, they switch back to traditional Medicare, which is they call it the red, white, and blue card, which is easier to get authorizations versus Medicare Part C. Medicare Part D is the prescription part, and it helps pays with prescriptions. So it can be standalone or bundled with Medicare Part C. So Medicare doesn't cover long-term care, or most dental care, vision, hearing, or care received outside of the United States. So if you're traveling abroad and you need medical care, and you know that you have some type of illness where you may end up in the hospital, you may want to get travel insurance because it doesn't cover care outside of the United States. Medicaid is income based. So, some states have expanded Medicaid to adults, some states have not. Kentucky luckily has. In Texas, they haven't done the expansion to the adult population. Medicaid does cover long-term care, but there's income limits to that. You can be dually eligible for Medicare and Medicaid if you meet income limits, which helps the participants pay the co-payments associated with Medicare Part B, as well as if they need long-term care planning. So if you have a lot of assets and you don't have great health, you may want to talk to an estate attorney to talk about how do I set up myself so that my assets are passed on to the next generation. And that is something to do early before a crisis, because once it's a crisis, then Medicaid has a 5-year look-back period in most states. Some have 3-year look-back period, and what your assets are your assets at that point. And this is just a chart of what Medicaid and Medicare covers. The thing to point out on this chart is that Medicaid varies by state what it covers. It's federal and state program, and the federal government requires Medicaid to cover a certain set of services, so all plans do that, but some states have been innovative and expanded other things that they actually cover. One of the accounts for people that are still working that I wanted to talk about that I actually just found out about a couple of years ago, and I wish I would have took advantage of it when my coworker told me about it, because I looked into it and now I finally understand what it is. So a health savings account is an account where you can put, for this year, up to $4,400 of your paycheck into this health savings account. What that health savings account does for you is that it's a pre-tax contribution. You can, once you get up to like $2,000, you can invest in that account if your plan has that option. I think most plans have that. So it grows at a tax-free rate. And then tax-free withdrawals for qualified health expenses. So there are certain things, normal things that you would think that you could be reimbursed for healthcare. You can use your HSA for the reimbursement. And this is probably and you take this, so say that the only exclusion is that you have to be in a high deductible health plan, but once you get the money in there and meet your deductible, then it works for you really well because your money starts to grow. And if you leave your job, then your health savings account follows you even into retirement. And as you age, you develop more and more chronic conditions. So you know that you'll have health expenses in older age. So these are, I can't remember when they exactly came into play, but it's something that I didn't understand and realize. But then when I figured out, oh, this is actually helpful and a tax benefit as well, it's something to look further into and see if your employer offers or if it's the right plan for you. And so I went over this. So you could do doctor's visits, co-pays, deductibles, dental, vision care, mental health services, long-term care insurance premiums with some limits. They have limitations, so you would have to talk to your particular plan to see if you're eligible for that. And then also care navigation services, so you'll have to check with your administrator depending on what you're getting for care navigation, if that would qualify for reimbursement. Like total? No. So there's contribution limits, which are $4,400 per year. If you're a certain age and you're playing catch up, then they allow you to do a little bit more. I don't know the limits because I'm not in that age range. Okay, yeah. So, but there's not like you can't. It's not like a flexible spending account where you put a certain amount each year in it, and then you have to spend it by that April of the following year. Your money can sit there and continue to grow. No, no. Once it's in your HSA, it's yours. As long as it's not an FSA. Okay, okay, yeah. As long as it's not an FSA, if it's an HSA, no, it's yours. And, with how the returns on the markets, like, because I'm at this age, I'm like, oh, I should have done this a couple of years ago. I would have been further along. And my friend told me about it. She was like, it's the best tax advantage that you have because it's three tax advantage. And even if you withdraw it in retirement and it's not for a health expense, you just get taxed on it. So it's a benefit all the way around. So I'll transition it over to what is a care navigator. It's basically a clinical professional who helps you navigate through the healthcare system, and really works for the client, not a hospital, not a skilled nursing facility, not a doctor or a therapist, is not a lawyer, but really helps you advocate when there's time in the healthcare system where you get stuck or your doctor may not be giving you information on, and not purposely, but you may not be understanding what your doctor is telling you, so you need someone, a second eye to review and follow up questions of how to frame that to your doctor. That's what a care navigator can actually do. The health system is complex and sometimes it's difficult to navigate. And that's really one of the reasons why I started Landmark Care Navigation, is because I'm like, I do this all the time. Not only for my regular job when I saw patients, but also for my family members too. And like I have so much experience navigating the healthcare system, I may as well help other people as well in the meantime. And so these are some of the services that I will provide. So advanced care planning, hospital navigation, and transition. So you're not understanding discharge, they're trying to force you to discharge. My Aunt Shirley's example earlier, where the next day they were ready to discharge her, I was like, no. And she stayed in there 4 more days. There are appeal rights. And so knowing those appeal rights, ongoing care coordination for complex cases, family consultation and mediation. Seen a lot of families not be able to agree and not get along when someone's ill because their loved one is sick and there's a lot of emotions at the time. So having someone to mediate and navigate and really clearly walk them through the decisions to hear all sides sometimes help. A second opinion coordination, say someone gets a serious illness diagnosis, helping the person see what paperwork is required, what academic centers are best in that particular illness, and helping them coordinate with their physician to give a referral for that second opinion. And then insurance navigation and appeals is what Landmark will be offering as well. And so this is my contact information should you be interested, free consultation. And so I wanted to bring it back to Hilltoppers because I am a Hilltopper. Weston is where I got my undergraduate degree is. And so every great team has a plan. If you want to be successful in the season, you want to have a plan. And the connection to advanced care planning is making sure your family knows your wishes, knows what you would want they should have to speak for you, and it leaves your family protected. And when people are sick, emotions are already high, and you want to leave them with a roadmap to actually know what you would actually want. All right. So this ends my presentation, and I have time for questions and answers if anybody has any questions. So, inpatient in the hospital, there should be a social worker or RN care manager. What I will say is that that didn't necessarily help in our situation. Um, and there's been several other situations where it had to be challenged. But the first stop is like ask for either a referral to the patient advocate or a social worker or an RN case manager. The ratios are pretty high in the hospital, so it really depends on what health system you actually use. But that's where I would first start. And then if you feel like, depending on, like if you have Medicare or Medicaid, um, depending on the situation, maybe calling the insurance company and talk to them about what's going on. Because the hospital gets a certain amount for each diagnosis. So what their goal is to come in under that amount and move people through the system. That's the other stop that I would say after trying to talk to the social worker or RN case manager or patient advocate. Any other questions? I would say it's the way you frame it, right? So a lot of people think when you say advanced care planning or advanced directive, it means that people are not going to treat you or you're close to dying. I think that advanced care planning, the way that I frame it, is it doesn't matter what age you are. Somebody could get in a wreck. You want someone to know what decisions you would want to be made, and you could be 21 and get into a wreck, and you still want someone to make decisions for you and know what you would want. So I would kind of frame it as this is a plan should something happen versus you're sick and you need to fill this out. I don't know if the people that you're talking about have an illness, but that's kind of how I would frame it. So there's a penalty if you don't sign up for Medicare Part B within a certain time. Medicare should send out a packet to the beneficiary before they turn 65 to give them options. And if you don't sign up I don't know the certain time frame. It should be. It may change, and I don't want to give you incorrect information. But the paperwork should tell you like you have this amount of time frame to sign up for Medicare Part B, and if you sign up for it late, then there's a penalty, and I'm not sure how much that penalty is. I think it. What did you say? 65, yeah. So it compounds each year that you delay sign up. You become Social Security eligible, not Medicare. Medicare is 65 and up, unless you have a disability. But if you didn't have health insurance and you were income eligible, then you could be eligible for Medicaid. Medicaid is income eligible, period. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, the penalty? Oh, it looks like it says 10% penalty, 20%, 1%. I would have to look at, yeah, this is not Medicare.gov because the regulations changed, so I want it to be the right Medicare.gov website. But I can look that up and see. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, then thanks for coming. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out. I have cards to give you guys.